My name is Teddy, and I redesign Winx Club characters. But today, I'm cooking them up from scratch. In this video, we will be talking about what became of Domino in my rewrite. So come along as we explore the ruins of a once thriving ancient kingdom. I welcome you to the village of Cascade. I think it is fitting to first look at the young woman who has found herself in charge of this village. Her name is Biankha, and she is the Fairy of Death. Those who live here have never left the now defunct borders of Domino. These icy mountains, dense forests, and toppled ruins are all they know. It seems poetic, in a way, that the Fairy of Death would appear here. It is not a title that shows up often, and many fairies will never encounter one who holds it in their lifetime. But here she is, a young woman in her late 20s, standing strong and courageous and full of spirit. The chief before her, Dorigo, had retired after serving his people to the best of his ability for over 20 years. He had injured his leg, and at the behest of his daughters and others close to him, was now living a more gentle lifestyle. Biankha has been, of course, very grateful for her father's guidance as she navigates stepping into the role he once held. She'd known from early on that she would likely be his successor, as she is his firstborn. However, her sister had never really seemed interested in the idea of leading the village anyway. We'll meet her later. Their mother unfortunately passed away several years ago. She'd been sick for quite a while, and when the time came, they were able to make her as comfortable as possible and say their goodbyes. Living in a place like this, one must face death fairly regularly, but still, it was incredibly hard for Biankha not to ache at the thought of it all. Out here, it takes a while for one to discover what their fairy title is. They don't have whatever fancy tests or trials or personality quizzes they use at Althea, only the wisdom of those that came before. When you're the fairy of something tangible, or even just perceivable, figuring out what your magic connects to is far easier than for what she had felt. Years went by where she struggled with her powers, and when she finally realized what her title was, it was bittersweet to say the least. Then her mother started getting sick. With magic like Biankha's, it was hard not to feel like she had brought this upon her, like she was cursed. Everyone did their best to reassure her, but surely some of them must have wondered as well. Since then, there have been countless times where her powers have saved lives, alerting her to danger like spidey senses, but it will always linger in the back of her mind. However, she isn't the kind of woman to let that guilt hold her back, warranted or not. She is the leader of her people now, and she does everything she can to ensure that they are safe and happy. She is a very compassionate and considerate person that does well under pressure, and she is certainly under a lot of pressure. Still, despite her oftentimes stoic demeanor, I would say that she's a generally happy person. Her position is high stakes, yes, but she's also part of a community that greatly supports and guides each other. She's engaged to the head scout of the village, a man named Callum, who we will also meet later, and she hasn't told him yet, but she's missed her last period. The two have been in love since they were teenagers, and are due to be wed only a day or two after the Winx arrive at the village, because I think it would be really fun to have a little wedding, and when they arrive, it's probably heavy on Sky's mind at that point, since they're almost done with school. Somehow. For her name, I combined the name Biankha, which means white and innocent and stuff, with the spelling of the word Ankh. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the symbol, but just in case, it's the Egyptian hieroglyph for life, and it's associated with the concepts of eternal life after death, the sustaining of life through cycles, and the life-giving power of the gods. I wanted to give her this symbolism to reinforce the ideas and themes behind her title. The Fairy of Death was born in a place that saw one of the greatest losses of life in history, a place without any kind of closure or justice, but now aids in leading a civilization that rose from those ruins, just as a forest will return from the ashes of a wildfire. Of course, for every outfit today, I will be going for something that looks warm. But each character still needs to have their own unique flair on it. I really wanted Biankha's look to be striking and memorable, but still realistic as something someone in a cold climate would wear. I took a lot of inspiration from the clothing of the Sami people of Scandinavia for the construction of the outfit, and that's something we'll see in the others as well, but I definitely played around a lot more with the colors. The Sami people utilize a specific color palette in their clothing a lot: red, blue, yellow, and green, with different localities using their own own preferences within that palette. It's a very strong cultural marker and part of their identity, and very interesting to learn about. For Biankha, I gave her pastels, and several shades of purple representing her position as chief of the village. I did go back in later and tweak some stuff with her, because I just wasn't satisfied for some reason. Something about it just was like kind of off. I changed her coat design, and I made her colors a lot brighter and lighter. It just made her feel more cohesive overall. As I mentioned before, her name does mean white, and as you've probably noticed, she's albino. I wanted to go in a unique direction with her design as a representative of death. So often these characters are drenched in black with more goth or alternative type styles, but that doesn't really mesh with the themes I'm going for within her character. Her skin lacks melanin, making it this pale, almost bone-like shade, yet still her cheeks are almost always flushed due to the cold, highlighting her liveliness with the blood flowing through her veins. Her eyes are pink as well, something common in those with albinism, but also symbolic of the negative association many have with death, and the way her character perseveres as a beacon of hope despite that. I know this would also make her eyes more sensitive to light, so I imagine sometimes she would wear special glasses to help with this, as someone who lives in such a snowy place. I mean, snow blindness is real. It is real. We have been having a lot of snow here on the East Coast, and it's blinding. Unlike the other fairies we know and love, the fairies of Cascade don't really go into a fairy form. They still have wings, of course, Biankha's being pink to match her eyes, and I based the shape of her wings on a death head moth's wings. But due to the cold, they don't really have a fairy form, especially the way that we know fairy forms to be back at Althea, where they represent sort of like a uniform that shows that you're using magic, that you're training to be a fairy. Up here, they don't think about it in the same kind of way, so they have their regular outfits and their wings out. And yes, the cold does affect their wings, but I will be talking about that later. Dorigo has another daughter as well. While Biankha can tend to be quite serious, her sister Zola is entirely austere. Though of course she loves her people, in all honesty she is relieved that her sister has taken on the brunt of the responsibility of filling their father's shoes. Zola prefers to keep to herself whenever possible, only really reaching out to her family and keeping a low profile when she does, on occasion, leave her cozy little cabin. She isn't mean or spiteful. In fact, she finds the thought of there being other people outside her walls very comforting. She just prefers herself to be inside them. Most of the others in the village understand and accept her the way she is, but some of the more rambunctious youth can sometimes be a bit weird about the chief's reclusive sister, especially when she gets back into her habit of peeking out the windows at night. Zola does play an integral part in protecting her village though. After Domino fell and the first few survivors found each other and tried to rebuild, they had more than physical construction looming before them. Those that could practice magic created a spell to preemptively protect the village from potential threats before they could even become one. The spell creates a magical barrier that shields their growing community from detection. The boundary far beyond the city limits, its invisible presence emits an ominous, foreboding energy to ward off any humanoid that may end up nearby. And any who trespass beyond that would become disoriented and confused until they end up wandering back out. In the past, there have been a few who maintain this barrier, but now it's managed entirely by Zola. As the Fairy of Silence, she is particularly well suited to the spell itself. In her cabin, there's a small shrine dedicated to the Mother Dragon where a low flame flickers. This is something you can find in pretty much every home in the town, and for those who are magic users, it serves as a sort of magical enrichment when used properly. Using that little boost every now and then allows Zola to reinforce the spell when she has other matters she needs to attend to. Though even without it, she's usually fine. She's able to monitor the barrier within her mind as if watching a screen, and when it seems to be weakening, she simply channels more magic to it. I feel like maybe I'm not good at explaining spells, but it's magic, okay? She has a psychic link to the FNAF security system, and she knows when to turn her light off or close the doors. Metaphorically. I like the idea of using the Winx's trip to Domino and finding Cascade as a perfect opportunity to sort of remind them that what they know isn't all there is. They meet a fairy with a title they feel has a strictly negative connotation, and a fairy that doesn't want to go out into the world and fly, essentially. Later on, I'll introduce you to a witch they will find quite intriguing as well. Zola's name means silence in Zulu, and I don't know, I feel like the vibe of the name just suits her, like phonetically, I guess, which in my opinion is just as important as the meaning when it comes to naming characters, and probably what makes me take forever to settle on names for OCs, the vibe. And of course, I try to capture the right vibe in their clothing as well. Zola is kind of a hermit, you know? Like I said, she prefers to be by herself and spends most of her time in her own home. So I gave her this big coat that she can put on when she's cold, but I kept it open to show her casual indoor outfit underneath. I like the idea that she would mostly be seen in her base layers, while everyone else is usually in their outerwear during the day. I made her outfit kind of plain, too, with neutral colors and little embellishment, in an effort to make the look itself quiet, if that makes sense. I'm really relying on that coat to make it visually interesting here. Although I do think she herself is quite striking in appearance. Though she's not fully albino like her sister, I did want there to be a bit of a nod to it, I suppose. So I ended up giving her lighter hair, a soft pink color, and eyes on the lighter side as well. Oh, also, I gave her braids with beads at the end, and I like the idea that she wears them because she's so quiet, people can never hear her coming without them. But of course, when she's on her own, she can use her powers to make them quiet. Seriously, shout out to all of you beautiful black women that wear beads in your hair. It's so gorgeous, but I feel like I would go insane, like hearing them clicking all the time. I've had earrings that just like the dangles clack into each other and I can't wear them. Finally, I gave her a similar wing shape to her sister, just a different color and angled downwards. I think fully downturned wings like hers would be quite uncommon and be indicative of a much weaker flying ability than for fairies with more average upturned wings. This disability would likely have contributed to her agoraphobia, as she feels safer hovering inside her own home than actually having all of that space to fly. Next, we have a man that is kind of representative of the general citizen of Cascade, I would say. Head scout and not a magic user, this is Callum, the lovely betrothed of the new chief. He's the one in charge of organizing and often leading patrols along the edge of the barrier. These patrols often forage and hunt as well, and sometimes last a few days, if not a week. He's an intelligent and resourceful survivalist, and those under his command trust him with their lives entirely. He is also very friendly and charismatic. Callum is the one to come across the Winx and specialists out in the woods, and after questioning them is the one who decides to bring them back to the village. Turns out they actually already have a friend there. I don't want to talk about it too much right now, but by following Valtor and the Tricks through a portal, Tecna managed to end up back on Magix after being lost in the portal that closed behind the Winx's ship. So yes, we are doing the whole Lost Tecna arc. And it leads them to Domino, as well as a few other things. Eventually, she wound up with the people of Cascade, so when Callum encounters the group, he's pretty sure they're the friends she'd spoken of. I think Sky would take to Callum immediately. His clear devotion to his people, undying love and loyalty to his fiancée, and his charming and confident demeanor. Sky definitely sees him as the man he wants to be. And like I said before, he's been thinking a lot about proposing to Bloom. It may seem early, but with everything that's been happening and his arc leading him to a place where right now he's prepared to throw down his life in an instant to stop Valtor and the Tricks, he is honestly probably a little bit worried he won't have the chance to later. That's the thing about Callum, though. He's too wonderful, isn't he? His wedding to Biankha is wonderful and joyous, going off without a hitch, and he's just found out that he's gonna be a father. Then here comes the dire state of the rest of the world, driving a stake into his happy little life. The Winx explain the situation more in-depth than Tecna had upon arrival, with Bloom giving a deeper rundown on Valtor than she would have liked to have to do, but honestly, Callum seems to already know quite a lot about him. More even than the village's spiritual leader, who I will be also showing you. Our group must stay in the village for a while, as Tekna has serious injuries she's still recovering from, and so they offer to help wherever they can. The girls use their magic however they can, and switch off with Timmy to keep Tekna company. The other boys are, of course, helping out where they can as well, and the timing is great since it allows Biankha and Callum some extra peace of mind while they take time off to celebrate. That is, until Zola comes to them with horrifying news. There are 4 unidentified entities within the barrier spell, and they seem unaffected by its deterrence. She can sense the sheer force of their negative energy all the way from camp like a migraine. It's clear to all that this must be Valtor with the tricks in tow, but why have they remained in Domino? Well, our characters don't know, but I can tell you. He's looking for some old friends. As night begins to fall, the great fox spirit arrives at the edge of the village, while those inside prepare for a confrontation. At any moment, they may come face to face with a figure of legend, their people's ultimate boogeyman, and evidence of his brutality surrounds them on all sides. Suddenly, Zola screams from her house. It is ear-piercing, as if in that moment all other sounds ceased to exist. When our gang rushes to her side, she reveals they aren't heading to the village. They're heading to a site that has been forbidden to go for generations. An ancient Dominion prison. Callum goes pale. He explains that one day out on patrol, he stumbled across the prison and curiosity got the better of him. He managed to get inside, and what he saw was monsters. So, Callum's character is an interesting case of kill your darlings for me. This is a value in writing that I strongly stand by. Sometimes, in the efforts of creating the best version of your story, you have to say goodbye to ideas that you are very attached to. And in this case, that idea was killing this darling. I created this character basically for the purpose of dying at the hands of our villains. He was made to be super charming and sweet all around for more of a gut punch when he dies. But I just simply couldn't come up with a way to bring our villains to the camp, or Callum to them, that didn't feel stilted and contrived. And believe me, I tried. I rewrote this section like 6 times. So now I suppose he more so serves as a way for Sky to get some self-reflection, and for our protagonists to learn about Valtor's plans without directly interacting with him, which, if we're being real, would probably not end very well at this point in the story. Oh, as for his appearance, that was part of his appeal as well. I wanted his nice personality to show in his body language and style. Like, even though he's in his mid-20s, he still kind of has a more playful, youthful look to him. The colors of his clothing match with his wife, because of course, but they have more of a focus on blue than purple since she's still the chief after all. And the cloak he wears acts as a symbol of the knowledge he's hiding, which, while not malicious in nature, I'd still like the audience to be wary of him despite how good of a person he clearly appears to be, you know? Last video, I told you the story of Icy's lost sister, Sophia, and what became of her after she was kidnapped. In that video, I also gave a bit of a sneak peek at a character we're gonna talk about right now. So, Winx has a huge cast. It's actually something I really enjoy about the show. However, because this rewrite was supposed to be only the first 4 seasons condensed down into 3, there are a lot of interesting characters from later on that I didn't think I would be incorporating. I feel I've always been drawn to media with very extensive casts, and as time went on and I learned more about these later season characters, I was honestly regretting how adamant I had been about not including them. Like, even though I don't really vibe with retconning her into Bloom's life, I cannot deny that Selena just has a certain appeal to her. I don't know, all of this is just to say I did a lot of brainstorming, and I have basically fully revamped a bunch of characters into OCs like I did with Sophia, so be on the lookout for that. Actually, the next one is right now, and it's Nex. Well, I changed his name to Nexus, as in the link between 2 things, the connection. In the original show, Nex shows up after Nabu's death as Aisha's new love interest. But, as we all know, in this version of the story, by this point, Aisha has been pining over Musa for like a whole season, and by now the 2 would finally be getting to start their true romance arc. As for Nabu, he's fine. He's out of his brief, medical, magically induced coma post host the Wizards of the Black Circle fight, and he understands that Aisha isn't going to fall for him, despite their parents' wishes. So what does all of this have to do with Nex? Well, I plan to have Ribbon and Naboo end up together, and I think Nexus would be a great catalyst to push them into realizing their feelings. At this point in their lives, Naboo has likely had experiences with a few male lovers here and there, but Ribbon doesn't even know he likes men. Sure, part of his initial dislike towards Sky, before he even knew he was the Prince of Arachneon, came from a place of misunderstood attraction and lashing out as a result of that confusion, but he never really processed that with everything else going on. I think that for Riven, Nex would definitely give him the same kind of feeling, but since he's gone through some serious character development, this time, instead of lashing out, he just ends up straight up crushing on him. This, then, would end up making Naboo jealous, which causes him to realize his feelings for Riven. Another thing about Nex from the original show is his status as a paladin. Now, Winx paladins are interesting. The first one we're introduced to is Professor Avalon, but when we eventually meet the students from Linfea College who are studying to be paladins, they seem to operate completely differently, with like elemental weapons, I guess. But they are still more like warriors than magic users, I think. In Dungeons & Dragons, paladins are sort of similar in that they're warriors who can use magic, but with the caveat that they have explicitly pledged their devotion to a deity and made a vow to fight for the side of good. They are considered a holy knight. Though I'm not calling Nex a paladin per se, I believe he still fits the D&D classification as he has devoted himself to the Great Fox Spirit. His official title is the Wizard of Merciless Winter, which may stand out to you because I've specifically avoided giving any magic users the title of wizard unless they were part of the Black Circle. However, I am using it here because the people of Domino would be unaware of its connotations amongst the rest of the world. Plus, I think it'll add to the drama, since the only other time they've interacted with wizards is a real sore spot for Naboo. Nexus feels at home in the snowy mountain landscape and can endure far more out there than others can. I imagine Sophia's magic could have even instilled a peace within him the night that she protected him from the cold and saved his life. Nexus is a passionate man that cares deeply about his people, just as they care about him. He is incredibly skilled in survival and is the village's most accomplished hunter. After each kill, he is sure to use every part of the animal and to honor their life and sacrifice. He's a butcher, a tanner, a pretty good chef, and has even made his own utensils and clothes from beasts he brought down himself. Perhaps sometimes he can get a bit carried away in his endeavors, be a bit loud and brash, cocky and stubborn, but this man is a force of nature and a true asset to his community. Because of all the work he does, I wanted to make him a pretty big guy. While he does have magic, I think he's also pretty adept at getting physical. Just for the sake of time, I didn't draw him a weapon, but I think it's safe to say he would fight with a hammer, like his counterpart from the show. I did also give him his red outfit, just translated from armor into a style that fits more with what I'm going for the people of Cascade. The last character we'll be talking about today is one I've sort of been alluding to throughout this video. Her name is Arasha, Witch of Cinders, and she is the spiritual leader of Cascade. She's a character made to play with the mechanics of this world, I suppose, in that she's not a fairy, and yet her powers derive from a connection to the Mother Dragon. Well, if that is the case, why is she not the Witch of the Dragon's Flame, or even Witch of Fire? Truthfully, in a way, she is. However, we must remember where we are right now. The remains of a once glorious kingdom that owed its very existence to the grace of the Mother Dragon. By granting the people of Domino the use of her magical cosmic fire, they were able to combat the harsh, frigid conditions of their surroundings, creating pockets of temperate salvation. After the kingdom fell and those sacred hearths were snuffed out, the embers of the dragon's fire remained. Some were able to be collected as the few left after Valtor's rampage tried to survive, and as they rebuilt, they nourished the small fires created from those embers. There have been many who take on the responsibility of tending to these little fires, both witch and fairy alike, whom also serve as spiritual guides for their people. Arasha is the current keeper of these little flames. I mentioned earlier the shrine Zola has in her home. Every building in the village has at least one of these little shrines, each with their own flame. They are far less powerful than the original hearths, but but manage to function similarly on a much smaller scale, providing a magical warmth to the space. Each day, Arasha delivers special kindling to every doorstep, as well as other enchanted items the homeowner may have requested for their shrine. At each full moon, she executes a town-wide examination of the shrines to ensure their health. During these checkups, she also collects the cinders that have accumulated in the shrine, which she uses to create a type of ashen fairy dust that can be sprinkled upon a fairy's wings to insulate them from the cold. The Winx would not be able to transform into their fairy forms while in Domino until acquiring this powder. I decided to make Arasha a more classic, for this universe, classic witch because I thought it would be very important for our protagonists to see that even in Domino, a place destroyed by the actions of the ancestral witches themselves, they're still not hateful towards witchcraft as a whole. With what happened, it would have been so easy for the survivors to look upon any witches among them and cast blame, but they rejected the idea of creating a scapegoat and instead came together with true Dominion spirit and built a new community. Instead of tearing apart the small faction that was left with infighting, they stood together strong and were able to persevere. The Winx spent the last season on Earth, and before that, they didn't have much positive interaction with witches, really. Only briefly during the fight with Darkar, and on the occasion Lucy might visit and say hi. Though, by this point in the story, it's been 3 years, the Winx are around 20, they're still pretty young, and they're likely falling into that trap of growing a resentment towards witches by now. They need a reminder that their enemy is Valtor and the Tricks, not every witch. Arasha serves as that reminder. She's endlessly patient and compassionate, loving every bit of the world the Mother Dragon has gifted them, and her devotion to the Mother Dragon is a mind blow to them in itself. They, especially Bloom, realize they always thought of fairies as having an inherent special relationship with her, even though all of them were here, existing in the world she created. I think it would also be very important for Bloom to get some time with Arasha, to study her ways, as she is the fairy of the Dragon Flame after all, but she doesn't even know much about her. Obviously, she came into this world late, having lived most of her life on Earth, and she doesn't have a true mentor, just Farragonda. Yet, here's a witch, preceded by generations with the same devotion, praying over a meticulously kept altar in hopes of communicating with the being that Bloom is supposed to be the representative of. This is where I'll stop in regards to that, because I do want to talk about it for Bloom's Enchantix. She does manage to communicate with the Mother Dragon. I really like Arasha. It was so fun to design another witch, even if she isn't exactly what we usually see from the witches we're used to. You'll probably be noticing me struggling a bit to nail down some details and her colors and stuff, especially her hair color. I felt like I had a really clear, specific image in my mind of this mystical, soft yet edgy, light yet dark kind of woman, and I just wasn't quite sure how to get that across. I started off with a very orange, fiery color palette for her, but eventually decided to lean more into ashy tones, as well as a kind of desaturated maroon, and I feel like that was the right way to go. I usually avoid using true black for characters' hair since it basically erases any line work that I might have put into it, and I love doing line work, but since all we see of her hair is her bangs, I felt like this was a fine occasion to use almost black. And I didn't want to just make her a redhead and have her be too similar to Bloom, you know what I mean? And of course, as the Witch of Cinders, I made her eyes like glowing embers in a bed of ash. Honestly, her design might be my favorite of the whole group. I feel like I really managed, through all of my struggling, to get across the vibe I was going for her in her look. She feels like part of the group while standing out in an interesting way. I mean, I guess they all kind of stand out in their own way. I don't know. These are my little OCs and I'm pretty proud of them. Alrighty, that's gonna be it for this very intense video. I've had the base ideas for these characters in my notes app for so long, and going more in depth into them was incredibly satisfying. It had been a while since I truly got to make an OC from scratch, always using the base that the original show provides me, and I had so much fun fleshing these guys out. It makes me want to go back and take a look at my old OCs that I've had forever and never did anything with. There's actually 2 separate groups of them that I have for totally different things. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Do they fit into this Winx world we've created? Which one is your favorite? Are you glad Callum managed to survive through all of my efforts? And who do you think are the friends Valtor came to release from their slumber? I am so excited for your feedback on this one. I really am. And if you want to leave a comment, please consider liking and subscribing as well. The videos I do that aren't the main girlies tend to struggle, unfortunately. So I really appreciate those of you that stick around for everybody else. You guys are seriously awesome. I love you so much. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, bye! By the way, I don't know if any of you picked up on it, probably, but the name of the new town is Cascade because that's what happens when dominoes fall. A cascade. Okay, bye.